There might be light at the end of the Formula One tunnel. And honestly, I didn't expect to say that after the start of the season in Melbourne. China showed us something that we haven't really had yet in 2026. Bit of hope, bit of passion. Before we get too carried away, this race also continued to show some of the same serious issues for Formula One in the current regulations. Yep. So today, I'm reviewing the Chinese Grand Prix as a shit sandwich. We're going to start with something positive. We'll drive into some of my frustrations that are continuing to be ever present, and let's finish with a positive and a big question. So, anyway, it's time to figure out whether F1 can actually fix itself, or am I just coping a little bit? Anyway, let's get into it. Yes, Kimi is a race winner. What a weekend. What a weekend. Kimi. And yes, I know. Congratulations to our newest race winner, Kimi Räikkönen. Terribly sorry. Old habits do die hard, even if that was 10 years ago. How funny was that they just fell onto the old Kimi Räikkönen as he was walking out for his first podium. Poor old Kimi Antonelli. But anyway, it was a fantastic win from him. It was a great weekend overall. And it didn't really feel like it was kind of lucky. There was some elements involved with Russell having some trouble. But he did own it. He raced hard. In the early parts of it. Obviously, he got pole position before that. Was showing some great composure. He had a small, late in the race, a small issue, which kind of took him a bit out of the zone, but he got straight back into it and just kept that solid gap to Russell. So he was like a driver that deserved to be in Formula One and deserved to take his first race win. And the symbolism is what matters here, because we were watching last year the rookies, the next generation actually arrive, and now they're participating. They're a part of it, It really does show that this latest crop of young guns, majority of them do have some solid skills behind them. But we can't take away from, I guess, George Russell finishing second and in what can only be described by myself as politely satisfied. Anybody else catch that he just wasn't quite buzzing for Kimi's first win? The smile that he was posing just didn't quite have the same buzz. But he's got to be on his best game, and his whole side of the garage will need to be on their best game, because otherwise Kimi could continuously just take some points where they don't, given that the Mercedes is so far ahead of everyone else. Now, if we get back to the podiums for China, what about Lewis Hamilton? He's back. He's on the podium. It felt familiar. The celebrations, the energy, his mojo is back. The champagne chaos with Bono on the podium. It was something that was reminiscent, and it almost felt like there were three Mercedes drivers, the way it was all just gelling beautifully. It was great to see him up there. I think that was great for the sport. It was a moment for the sport to have him back with his mojo. And I guess, with Kimi taking his first win, it really did make the whole thing feel more human and emotional and expressive. And for me, just took away a little bit of some of the dark clouds with some of the other stuff going on. So it was great. It was a great outcome, and really happy. Congratulations, Antonelli. Okay, so on to the middle part of that sandwich I talked about earlier, the super clipping and reliability crisis. Unfortunately, it's a big one. China exposed what might be one of the largest problems of this regulation era. Is the cars, the power units, the batteries that are causing or impacting the whole championship. 4 cars didn't even start the race. Obviously, overall, that number increased to 7 retirements. And it's just such instability. And I know it's still early days, but these power units, the battery systems, they're just not ready for what I've spoken about in the past of Formula One being the pinnacle of engineering. Um, the, we're seeing it online, like the fans everywhere have been talking about. It feels artificial with the overtakes and the power boost and all of this stuff happening. That it's not feeling right for a lot of people. Now, look, it's not by everybody. I had a great opportunity to have some great comments back and forth with some of the people on the last video, and I really appreciate that. But um, I guess the common argument from some of these people is all about that F1 has always had some sort of artificial manipulation via the regulations. And that is true, right? We've had like groove tires try and slow them down, skinny wings for aero wash. They introduced the hybrid engines with the KERS originally, and obviously the most recent was DRS. Yeah, but here's the difference in my eyes and why I feel like this is a different era, because the regulations weren't actively stopping cars from participating. They weren't um, kind of manufacturing what I feel is a um, like a really exciting part of the sport, where you get some of the iconic overtakes. Like yeah, it. I just feel I understand where you're coming from with the arguments, but for me, it's still not gelling quite right. And I guess if you take it further from some of this stuff, we're seeing the drivers majorly impacted. We've got rear locking. Okay, that seems to be an ongoing issue for multiple teams, and we've seen it for quite a few drivers now. Caused by this deployment issue and the braking systems. That deceleration on the main straight, which Formula One kind of hid a fair bit when they were doing it in China. But they're just slowing down in areas where they should be flat out, and we should be seeing some enthralling, exciting kind of speed. And I guess the drivers are spending a lot of time listening to some of the radios. They're spending a lot of time managing systems, trying to figure out where and how to deploy, talking back and forth with engineers. And I sort of feel like when you've just got majority of the car and the power, it comes down to the setups, it comes down to racecraft. Those are the things that I really enjoy. But one of the things I did not enjoy, and probably the worst moment for me of the weekend, was the start of the race and both McLarens failing to even make the start of the race. Like it was devastating. First Lando and then Oscar on the actual grid. Both had battery sort of power unit issues. Apparently slightly different, but ultimately down to the same part. To the same part of the engine. It's the electrical system. And like honestly, my heart just sank. I was just like, not again. Like Oscar obviously had that bit of his mistake, but a bit of the power unit surge that caused him not to race in Melbourne. And then again, he didn't complete a race lap in the main race. Thankfully, he got some time during the sprint to get his kind of legs under the table a little bit. But then Lando Norris, I mean, barely anyone is talking about. Like, he's basically a Mr. Nobody. He was last year's World Drivers' Champion, and he is nowhere in this championship fight. I mean, he's 36 points behind Russell already. And then if you think about McLaren with the constructors gap, it's 80 points to Mercedes already. It's just 2 rounds. And it's like it's not just a deficit. Like, this is a mountain. Like, this is an absolute huge turnaround they have to do to even get back in the game. Now it's possible, but it's not it's not going to be an easy feat, especially with the way the Mercedes are looking. And I guess, like, if we start thinking about it, the really brutal part of this whole new regulations is that Well, I think that they've been done for the wrong reasons. They've been done out of this sustainability message. They've been done, to try and balance electricity as well as like electrical power as well as engines. When like it is impacting, in my opinion, the racing. I know not everyone agrees, but I'm struggling to get past it. Even though China did suit the battery deployment because they were able to regen a lot better than Melbourne. So this track was better. And so it is going to be track dependent on how much of an impact we have. But, I just think the talk of the town in a lot of the Reddits and a lot of the other things, Facebooks and Instagrams and stuff, and other YouTubers is about how much this is breaking the immersion of what F1 was or is. So, I'm really hoping that we can get some resolution. And look, we've got a really big break, effectively 3 full weeks. I think it will be by the time they get cars back and then have to ship them off to Miami. There's a whole month that they've got between racing, so about 3 weeks in full where the FIA can get on top of it. The teams can work on it. And especially like you think about McLaren and Williams in particular, learning about how the deployment will work. They're kind of on the back foot because Mercedes didn't really give them the full-blown engine until quite late just before Melbourne. So I'm hoping they can get on top of it and, it'll be less of an issue, even though it will still probably be something that impacts over the entire season. So now let's give credit where credit is due, because there was something that did work. And I think the aero changes that they have made seem to be working really well. The cars are able to follow, and this is why some of those overtakes in China with the long straights, etc., they were able to follow so closely in the preceding corners and get some legitimate overtakes that weren't just boost power and things happening artificially, a little more organic in the sense of some of the passes that happened. And I guess if we're talking about some of those passes that happened, there was genuine racecraft. People were adjusting their lines to get some wind over the aero package, so get their nose in the right spots. And there was some legitimate, really cool passing that was happening. And I guess the other kind of ironic thing was some of the car failures that are happening because of the power units. It's actually mixing up the strategy a little bit. So safety cars come out, they're having to, in this case, had to pit a little earlier than they wanted, and that then played out were they going to be able to make it on a one stop, or have to push through to the two stops. So there was a little bit of I guess unpredictability that made it quite exciting. Now, the really big positive, well, for me, Ferrari nailed their strategy. You heard it here first. Mark it off in your calendars. Ferrari strategy success. I mean, what a great thing to happen, where there was a small hesitation during that part of the race where I thought, oh my goodness, what's going to happen? And then they made the right calls. They kept themselves in the game. It was just great to keep both Ferraris up there. But then let's isolate Lewis Hamilton, because, as I said earlier, he's got his mojo back, and it's probably an underline, but one of the biggest stories from the weekend of how he was driving. He was really, rather than just trying to get through an entire race, he was legitimately fighting for positions, both the lead, but also to maintain the last spot in the podium. I was thinking that probably, like a lot of people, Leclerc was going to get the better of him because he has done in the past. But this was the first time, that he really took it to Leclerc, and then just Leclerc ran out of tire and couldn't keep up with him. So that was really awesome. It was great to see. And, I guess he's had some time to build the car over the off season and during 2025. And so he's really kind of gelling with this new era. And so if Ferrari can keep the developments coming, they could be a real shot, especially if Mercedes start, fumbling a few things or things going wrong with their power unit. So I guess this race is a bit of a dangerous question for the grid. Like, if Lewis Hamilton is believing, is it possible? Will he get his 8th? Will he retire if he gets his 8th? Like, there's a whole bunch of questions that can happen as part of this. But it's just, in my opinion, it's just great to see him have his mojo back, and looking forward to how he tackles some of his favorite circuits throughout the season. Let's fingers crossed it goes well to actually take it to Mercedes. So I guess let's do a bit of a wrap on my thoughts on where does China leave us and how we're feeling before we move to Japan as the next race. And I'm still a little bit conflicted, but I guess the emotion of Kimi winning his first, Lewis back on board. I did like the aero. It does seem to be working really well. I think that's all some positive stuff, but the machinery still feels fragile. And when you've got 4 cars not even able to make the start, like that's some pretty significant stuff that's happening. So, we're hoping that they can get on top of that for the rest of the season. And this is like an outlier rather than an ongoing problem. I guess, the other upside was that China showed us that it's not going to be as bad as what Melbourne was. So some tracks will be better for this generation of cars. And so let's hope that it's not all doom and gloom, and that we might get some reasonable spectacles, because especially if Formula One can make some changes to give either more power out of the actual engine, and that will help with some of that boosting and reduce the clipping stuff. So let's hope so. But anyway, given that there is light possibly at the end of the tunnel, the big question now is whether everybody else, people like me and others that are still excited, can maintain that excitement for the whole year. Because I'd hate for it to continue on too far, too long, and for some fans to lose interest. So let's hope it's in the upward trend that's going to continue doing that, and that we feel like we're going to still love F1 despite perhaps some of these regs. So, I guess it feels good when we get the right sort of outcomes of, the warm and fuzzies of Kimi Antonelli taking his first win. But when you see some of the, McLaren's not starting, for instance, it still doesn't feel like my F1 just yet. Anyway, let me know what you think. Love to hear your comments. If you did like this, thanks for watching. Hope you like and subscribe, and let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. But otherwise, catch you in the next one. See ya.